Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Krashy, and today I wanted to do a short discussion video talking a little bit about Kallari, but also talking about the kind of assassin archetype that exists here in Predecessor. Now, not just in Predecessor, obviously. The assassin archetype definitely exists in all MOBAs, but more specifically want to talk about Predecessor. But if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, drop a like on the video, and yeah, let's go ahead and dive into it. So with the most recent V0.3.2 patch, we saw a nerf to Kallari. And we actually saw some slight changes to Fangmao, so I'll go ahead and get those out of the way as well. Pulling some of his physical scaling down on his ultimate and raising his pen scaling by quite a bit. So that is a very intentional change, right? What that does is that makes Fangmao an assassin specifically because now you are kind of being forced to build pen in order to scale him up to a reasonable level. That aside, we're going to touch on Fangmao in just a little bit, but so very, very intentional that Fangmao is an assassin, and Kallari, obviously the stealth hero of the game, is an assassin. So what happened with Kallari? Well, she got some attack speed nerfs. They hit her, what did they say, infamously fast clear time in the early game, and so they hit her attack speed growth, and they hit her attack speed in the early game. So this change, on top of the nerf to Malady, which was a very prominent assassin item for Kallari, which I play two different Kallari builds. You usually go Malady into pen, Malady pen into pen items, or I would go more of a crit Kallari build into pen items. And honestly, either which way, you have to start with a short sword, and the early game of Kallari feels absolutely atrocious. It's really, really bad. Now, I don't really understand this change because it's definitely a response to, Kallari kind of dominating and taking over games and snowballing, but that's less of a Kallari issue, which it could have been a Kallari issue, but much less of a Kallari issue than it is a player-based issue that is still young and hasn't quite adapted to the playstyle of a snowballing assassin, which is exactly what the character has to be. So if you were to ask me whether or not Kallari scales well into the late game, yes or no, the answer is no. Kallari is really not the best at team fighting unless she's incredibly far ahead and can just get in the backline and one-shot someone. If it's on even footing, you're not really going to have a great experience playing Kallari into a late game team fight. So with that knowledge, when you're facing a Kallari, you just need to play the early game incredibly safe, give up some farm, make sure you're not feeding. And that goes for the whole team, right? That's the whole team has to really do their part, keep strong vision, have really strong awareness, pay attention to the map whenever she does blip up on a ward so you know about where she's at, and slow the game down. But instead, we got a pretty hefty nerf to Kallari that has quite, I'd say in a pretty large fashion has hindered her early game, and now has made the character an okay early game hero that doesn't scale into late game, as opposed to a phenomenal early game hero that had the potential to snowball a game and then scale into the late game kind of poorly. So overall, I've been pretty consistently putting Kallari around B tier in a tier list because she's not really super competitively viable. I think she's okay and competitive, but now I almost want to put her down in C tier, or just put her really, really low B tier, and explain the fact that she already wasn't a great teamfight jungler. Whenever you do take her, you know that you're sacrificing some of your endgame scaling, but you're also sacrificing some of your HP pool and defense pool, because any other bruiser Fighter, Grux, Chimera, Crunch, any other Rampage, Steel, any other tank, fighter, bruiser, anything in those two kind of classes is going to bring you a lot more frontline capabilities. It's going to bring you more CC, it's going to bring you more health and armor and more potential to lock down targets, whereas Kallari has to just get a kill, right? And so we've already established, and if you play a lot of Kallari, I feel like this should be common knowledge. We've already established that Kallari doesn't really quite scale into the late game super well, but now Kallari doesn't really have the benefit of her super strong early game either. So I don't quite understand the change. They in the notes, I really wish I would have brought them up, but in the notes it said something like, they want to hit her infamously fast early clear, but her infamously fast early clear is the benefit of playing the hero that doesn't scale into the late game super well. It's the benefit of playing the assassin that doesn't bring a lot of CC, bulk, health, and armor to the table. So hitting the infamously fast early clear, I think it quite literally just butchers the hero. It just butchers the hero and puts her in a place where, now I don't really ever want to pick her. Now I'm in a position where it would be much more beneficial for me to play Rampage, which it always is, or Chimera, which it always is, or any other pick other than Feng Mao. Like I said, I'm definitely going to touch on him in just a second, but I would love to hear your thoughts on this. This definitely wants to be, or I definitely want this to be a bit of an open-ended discussion, because the reality is that Kallari in pub matches, like, you definitely can still achieve the same thing. It's just way harder, but it being way harder than it was before makes it not worth trying, in my opinion. I don't think that picking Kallari is like a pretty solid choice in jungle right now. I'm just not a huge fan of it. I think that her early clear is really bad. I think that her ability to snowball with the nerfs to Malady and just with the nerfs to her attack speed in general has been, pretty drastically hit. And when you're taking a character that is basically relying on that snowball potential and not on the end game potential that it brings to the table, I just think it's too much of a liability. So yeah, let's touch on Feng Mao a little bit. I personally think that Feng Mao is the worst hero in the game. I just think that, I know it's hard to compare, like, say, Feng Mao and, like, Muriel, right? But seriously, I would rather have a Muriel in offlaner and support than have a Feng Mao in jungle or offlane. I think that the hero is absolutely atrocious, and I know this isn't a video about him, but I want to talk about that assassin archetype, right? They've shoved him into that assassin archetype where, outside of Countess, which she kind of exists a little bit like assassin adjacent because she's AP focused, and we'll have to see what Shinbi feels like as well, because I don't really know much about the hero. But aside from the Countess, these characters just aren't quite bursty enough, right? And you look at what Countess can do, right? She jumps in, she's 75% health someone, if she ults them, boom, they're dead. And that kind of a rotation, that burst rotation, doesn't really exist for Feng Mao or Kallari outside of them being incredibly fed. And I think that is the issue, right? You have these characters that are much better in the jungle, but aren't getting that same snowball potential and that same, like, burst one-shot potential, and therefore it's kind of hurting their viability. So the funny thing with Feng Mao is, like, I literally played him recently. I don't know if y'all have noticed this, but he like struggles to clear his own jungle. And I think Kallari does a little bit too. Like, there are certain times with Kallari where if you're not getting fed and you're just kind of on, like, a really flat, like a linear curve of gold and levels, per minute or whatever you want to say. Like, if you're just on a nice even curve of improving and getting stronger in the game, you're not really actually able to clear super well. Like, Kallari's going to take, like, a little bit of damage from each of her camps, and Feng Mao, he gets beat the hell up. Like, he actually just, like, gets his ass beat in the jungle. And I just find it really, really funny that these are the characters that are supposed to excel at clearing and, like, dominating the jungle really fast so they can get out to the lanes. And they don't have to have necessarily, like, the fastest clear on every camp. Like, maybe they have like, really good, like, single target clear, so that way, like, killing the, like, the 3 camp or the 2 camp is really, really fast for them because they can burst those targets down really, really quickly. And maybe they struggle a little bit more on the 4 and 5 camps, but in general, they just feel like they struggle entirely, and they're having a hard time getting out to the lanes and getting out to reoccurring ganks or finding invades to have that impact that they want to have. So, like I said, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. I think the assassin archetype outside of Countess, like I said, she's a little bit assassin adjacent, being AP or magic power, is very, very different. But yeah, that assassin archetype is really struggling in Pred, and I think that it's failing to find its identity as the player base is just getting a little bit confused or giving off some confusing vibes when it comes to playing against these snowbally assassins. You got to know what they can do, and you got to be prepared to deal with them whenever they are strong. But right now, unfortunately, I think the assassin archetype is not very strong. So leave your thoughts in the comment section down below. I'd definitely love to hear it. As always, friends, thank you so much for watching. Drop a like on the video, subscribe for future Predecessor content. Be sure to be kind of well and tell someone you love them, and I'll see you on the next video.